You have your consent agenda, which was sent out electronically. Has your agenda, your minutes, and the financials. Any questions, concerns on the consent agenda? If not, I would hear a motion to approve.
I so move.
I'll second.
David and Larry, second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay. Public comment. Vicki, do you have anything you would like to share with us?
I don't think so.
All right, thank you very much.
Good work. Another great year in the books, I guess.
All right, very good. Lana, I think we are ready for your report.
Good morning.
Good
Morning.
Project Green River, this is the Garden City Co-op project, and as you guys remember, they did started down the process on one parcel of ground, and then another parcel came available that had better access for transportation. They are pursuing rezoning of that other property now, so long as everything goes okay with that, we should see that project kick off pretty rapidly. Hidden Trail, they are now open for business. If you guys haven't been by there, it's been really fun to watch. They've had really, really good support so far. So they're not fixing food at this is the Geyer Barn. They're not preparing food there, but they are bringing in food trucks on some evenings. They've got a special deal worked out with Pinkies and with Tequilas, since they're right there handy, and they're bringing food over for folks, or you can take your own food in. It's really interesting. It's certainly
Take your own food in.
you
like
can. Yeah, it's certainly something.
a lunchbox or what?
Whatever. Take your bento box and off you go.
Wow.
But it's been really fun to watch because it is completely different than anything we've had before, but it's going really well, and all the reports I've heard on the beer are really, really good. So that's exciting. We're really happy for them that things are going well. It's been fun to watch that come together, and I was shocked when I pulled this up, and that was July of 20. And here we are, December 21, and they're open. So as Bob says, boy, this economic development thing happens fast. But as long as it happens, right?
So have they had good business?
They've had excellent turnout. They've been really pleased. It's been going really well. I've not been there. I know Shannon has been there. Scott, you've been there?
Been there twice.
And you've been there twice. Well,
Yeah,
Ron
the beer's good.
Ron's your expert then. There you go.
Have a little bit of history to that. My granddad built that building.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And my uncle and I wired it later on. My uncle
So
owned it.
have you been over there yet?
Huh?
Have you been over there yet?
Not since it's open, no. I'm not a beer drinker.
Well, you don't have to be a beer drinker. You need to go see it. It looks really cool.
I was
They
kid- I
have
was kidding you.
hard.
I'm not
Just
gonna be a
saying.
beer drinker, but I do want to go see it. Fine.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
have
Well,
they
take
have
your
hard liquor
McDonald's with you
too.
when you go, 'cause they're not gonna serve you food, okay? So take your Happy Meal with you.
There you go.
All right. Moving on. Project 521, this is a housing subdivision that we've been working on. The wastewater study that we contracted for on behalf of the county with PEC was scheduled. They were hoping to have us a kind of a preliminary report by the end of the year. They're running a little bit behind on that. No surprise, PEC is, we were just speaking before the meeting, they're very busy. They've got quite a few projects going, but they're hopeful that they're just a couple of weeks behind on that. So they do think their final report will still get to us in time, which is end of January. So we'll keep working with them on that. As we've said before, that wastewater plan is really the linchpin to be able to do some of that development in the Quinby area between Garden City and Holcomb. So we're excited to get that report and see what it looks like. Prospect 321, this is Hunter's Glen, and had a conversation with Michael Snodgrass, the developer on this property yesterday. USDA is way behind on closing loans. They were 2 months behind on getting out the final approval letters, and they just kind of shrug and say, well, we're busy, you know. So they won't probably be closing these loans. They were supposed to close by December 31st on his first loan. And if you remember, we did a bridge loan up front for some of the engineering and such. So he is sending a letter of explanation for why that's been slowed down. But he has included the payoff of the short-term loan that we did into his preliminary financing for land purchase. So hopefully we're just a couple of weeks different than what it was supposed to be, but very frustrating when you're dealing with the federal government. So he did go ahead and apply for the second phase, and he's been told by, at least by one of his contacts there, that his application may have been the only application in the country for those funds in this round, simply because the projects are so challenging to get through the process that a lot of developers just aren't applying for them right now. So that probably bodes well for getting the funding, but it's also frustrating that it's that cumbersome to get to access to those dollars.
Apparently it's cumbersome for the government to read them too, huh?
Well, they're, one of his folks who is retired from USDA and now works for him as a consultant said, yeah, what it really comes down to is everybody has use it or lose it vacation at the end of the year. So anything that they schedule in November or December, you can pretty well bet it's gonna get pushed back till after the first of the next year, because everybody's gotta get their vacations in. So, silly us. Prospect 820, this is Lost Rivers, and things are moving along well there. We had a good meeting last week with the developer on it. He is working with a local to manage the project, which I think would be very, very helpful. I think we figured out during the bonding process that it's just very challenging to not have a local administrator working on that project. We ended up doing a lot of that work, which we were very happy to do, but it is challenging when the developer's in Dodge and you know, trying to get permits here, trying to get plans turned in. So again, we did a lot of that work for them, but certainly I think it would be helpful for them to have a local person available to do that when we're not necessarily readily available. Project Daytona, I did present to the Planning Commission at their November meeting about the mixed use areas and why we're promoting the idea of using those, and it was very well received. The Planning Commission had great questions, and they're raring to go. Their response to the NDS office was just tell us what we need to do so we can get the process started. So they will get some appropriate zoning designations that will allow for the mixed use, and hopefully right shortly after the first of the year we'll be able to start really moving forward with plans on the initial site that we have identified for that. Red Wing, things are moving well there. These resolutions for the TIFs will go before the county on Monday and the city on Tuesday. So we got those submitted for the packets yesterday afternoon from their attorneys. Things are moving along well there. The broker has been working on some marketing materials, and we've been working closely with the broker and the developer to make sure that we have everything in place and ready to launch just as soon as the property is available for development. Lots of meetings, even though it's been a pretty quick turnaround from last month's meeting to this one. We've been very, very busy. Had a lot of good things happening, but certainly going to be a race to the end of the year as we finish a bunch of stuff up. In January and February are both shaping up to be very busy months as well. So I would draw your attention to the fact that we do have on January 10th, I'll be giving a presentation. The Southwest Kansas Builders Association has been honored with one of the fastest growing organizations across the country. And so Greg Ugaldi, who is the former chairman of the National Association of Home Builders, is coming out to present their award to him, which is very cool, coming from Connecticut. And then they've asked me to give just kind of a general update on economic conditions and where we're at, and you know, the way overbuilding that we've done of housing after his presentation that morning. So that if you guys are interested in that, reach out. If you like to go places early in the morning, David, we're happy to get you in there. So that'll be January 10th. January 20th, we have a water sustainability conference here. You guys may or may not remember, pre-pandemic, we were working with the 3 of the corporate partners, the City of Garden City and the Rural Water District, on some pretty advanced water sustainability planning. And that work has continued, even though we haven't really had the opportunity to get back together and kind of discuss where everybody's at. But fortunately, we're gonna get to do that in January, so, we're excited about seeing where we're at with that and how people are feeling about it now. And Southwest Kansas Night Out in Topeka, that event is scheduled for January 24th. If you are interested in that, let us know. We will, most likely, will be securing hotel rooms early in January for that, so if you'll let us know if you have an interest in going, we can get you a room. And that is a Monday evening, and it's just that evening. It's a reception. It's, you know, Phil's been there, Bob's been there. That may be it.
I've been there
You have been there. Oh, yeah, you've gone.
as law enforcement.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a fun event. If, you know, if you're interested in going, it's a good opportunity to just remind legislators from across the state, but certainly our delegation, that we're out here and that what they do matters. So let me know if you have an interest in going to that. And that's really, I guess I should update on childcare. If you guys remember when the city of Garden City did their first round of distribution for the American Recovery Dollars, they allocated $600,000 to the Finney County Child Care and Early Learning Network to create childcare slots in the community. The county had, at that time, had also mentioned that they hoped to be able to match that. And we went and made a presentation to them at their last meeting, the county commission's last meeting. And while they did not allocate all of their funds, they wanted to wait until their final seat was filled. They did opt to go ahead and authorize $600,000 of those dollars to go towards Finney County Child Care and Early Learning Network. So very exciting. The network is very excited. The board is working now to lay out exactly what those next steps looks like, and we're going to see childcare in Finney County next year.
So those plans for those funds, will the existing facilities get opportunities to use some of that money, or is that basically?
Well, not the 600. The 600 goes to the network, but there was conversation at that meeting
Okay,
for additional deals. Their consultant recommended, after, you know, researching, that there were 48 other small licensed in-home daycare.
sure.
And sustainability was the word that he used, would be
Okay.
really important. And he encouraged the commissioners to set aside some
funds
money
for that.
for that. And they indicated support, but they don't want to be in the business of deciding who gets it. So I think at the next meeting, there will be further discussion about allocating a bucket of money. And I believe the indication that Lana had offered would be that the network would be a perfect place to
allocate
decide
those funds.
who needs help and how to distribute it. So
Good,
The network already has that in its plans,
okay.
being able to offer grants, just, you know, the small grants for things we've all heard of that,
Sure.
you know, I don't have the proper stair rail, or I don't have the gate that I need, or I don't have the fence for the outdoor play area, or whatever the case may be. The goal all along has been for the network to have a small pool of money that they could jump in and help get people over those hurdles.
Well, it's
So
my
it just
understanding
makes
that the existing, like the, what is it, community daycare over by the college has had heating and air conditioning equipment go out or something, and they've gone without for a period of time until they were able to
Right.
allocate funds towards
they went
that.
without hot water for a week
So, yeah,
for that same kind of thing. And so, yeah, those kind of things.
yes.
I think is
those
what's
can
coming
be,
down the line.
those can, I mean, just a small thing like that can
Sure.
create a pretty big crisis in the childcare world, so.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, the idea is that we would always have a pool of funds that would be available
Awesome.
for
All right.
something just like that, so we're not out doing a crisis fundraiser trying
Exactly.
to get things put back together.
Okay, thank you.
And again, ultimately, you know, the whole idea of the network is that we create a sustainable model. So, you know, we've already been in meetings with community daycare, and certainly the goal is that they will adopt the same tuition rates and be able to right size at some point. Right now, they are just the wrong size. They're too big to, you know, to be sustainable the way they are, but not big enough to increase tuition to the point that they could be sustainable at the size they are. However, we don't have the luxury of shutting down any slots, you know, so they're having to just maintain at what they are. But hopefully, once we get some slots rolling in the community, they can right-size their facility, and then they won't have these issues. They'll be able to operate just like the network centers will, and have a reserve always in place to be able to handle repairs and those types of things when they come up, and pay their staff a living wage, which is
Good.
huge.
Yeah. Currently, they are probably the largest daycare in a community, correct?
Oh, they're the
Yeah.
only,
Yeah.
they're the only actual childcare center that
Okay.
we have in the community.
Okay.
All of the rest are home-based.
Other than
KCSL
Turning Point.
is, what's that?
Turning Point.
Well, Turning Point now, yes. But KCSL is listed by childcare aware as childcare slots, but they're not.
No, okay.
Those are just partial day preschool, except a small handful that are actual childcare. But as far as full spectrum 0 to 6-year-old care, it's just community daycare, and as Bob said, now Turning Point as well, so.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. And that is really all we have. We've not had a Spark meeting yet. We've had emails letting us know that it's coming, and that the legislature is working on some of their own ideas so that they have something to present to those committees, but they've not scheduled those yet. And the Future Fellows work, this is the week for the second session of that. So I had meetings Monday and Tuesday, and we'll have meetings again tomorrow. Fortunately, they're virtual, so at least I'm not having to drive across the state, but it's a lot of sitting in front of the computer and being really present to get that work done. So we're excited about it, though. I think there's going to be some good things come out of it.
Would you touch a little bit on the follow-up work of the chat study, the housing study, and how it impacts our HID, not only in Holcomb, but also the county?
Sure. So as you guys know, we do contract for the housing study every 2 years. Previously, the study has always shown that the demand was in Garden City, because that's where all of the growth had been. All of the development had been in Garden City, so the study just kind of naturally assumes that the growth will continue where it is. And this year, we were really careful about explaining to them that, number one, we needed them back out in the community instead of just doing another update. We needed them to come back, meet with stakeholders, and do the whole gamut. But also that we needed them to be fully aware that we're out, for all intents and purposes, we're out of property within the corporate limits of Garden City to allow us to meet the future demand. So none of you, I'm sure, are surprised that we did not catch up on housing in the last 2 years. It's shocking. So we are now just shy of 2,000 units that we need to have lived in by 2030. So probably not going to meet it by then either, but we're certainly pushing ahead. The good news is, though, that because they came into the community and really looked at where we were with land use, it was pretty obvious that there was a case for additional housing in the unincorporated areas of the county as well as in Holcomb. So that's where we are right now. We went back to the county at last week's meeting and gave them the option of having us continue to pursue making our HID available in the unincorporated areas, and they did authorize us to move forward with that. So we've identified parcels. Steve's already mapped those parcels, and kind of next steps, we have to identify potential locations for our HID. It's really important to know that just because we identify it in the upfront plan doesn't mean that we can't add a different parcel. So if a year from now somebody comes to us and says, hey, I've got this parcel that you guys didn't think about, or that I wasn't even thinking about for housing or whatever, that's okay. You can add them at any time to make them eligible. But we've already identified the initial parcels that will be included. A plan has to be written, and then that plan basically is submitted to the Kansas Department of Commerce to authorize that, yes, the county acknowledges that their housing study is accurate, they acknowledge that the housing demand is great, and they acknowledge that they're willing to do these rural housing incentive districts in order to stimulate housing construction. So again, I think it's really important that people understand, very much like a TIF, our HID really is just a housing tax increment finance district. That's what it is. But there's always question from folks who say, well, that just seems like you're giving away the farm, because you are foregoing the increase in property taxes that you're going to get off of that parcel. You're allowing the developer to recoup at that increment to repay his investment in infrastructure for the first 15 years. However, it's really important to note the infrastructure that developer is building isn't his. It belongs to the county, right, or the city, or whatever jurisdiction he happens to be building in. So I think the easiest way to explain it is, either we as taxpayers can say, yeah, I'm cool with going out and building a bunch of streets and extending water lines and sewer lines and doing all that, and then hoping that somebody goes and builds houses there. I'm cool with that. Or the way our community has done it, we've said, you know what, if the developer believes in his project enough, let him take that risk. Let him go build our streets, our water lines, our sewer lines, our electric, let him go build that. And then we'll let him get a payback for what he's invested in our infrastructure. So I think it's really important that we remember that. These tools, used the way we have utilized them traditionally, really become a way that we can partner with developers without taking the risk and without putting that risk on the taxpayers of our community. So, and we try to make sure that we tell that story every time we're in front of the governing bodies, because it's so easy to get caught up in, oh, well, that developer's going to get rich off us. No, if the city, the county, whoever had already built those streets, those water lines, he wouldn't have to worry about that expense. The developer would be just stepping in and building stuff. That we don't have that luxury. We don't have a bunch of lots sitting around that are ready to go. So the RHID tool is really one of the most responsible ways that you can do that, I believe, instead of building a bridge to nowhere and hoping.
Of those 2,000 units that somebody has established that were short, what is the makeup of single family and multifamily?
It's literally everything. And they really don't get into single family versus multifamily as much as owner-occupied versus renter-occupied. And it's a pretty even split, I think, this time between the two, which is interesting. Certainly it wouldn't have been that many years ago, and owner-occupied was always kind of the push, just because everybody wanted to own their home. But we've really seen that shift with younger Gen Xers and with Gen Y, that they just don't want to. The millennials are like, let somebody else worry about the maintenance on this. I'm cool with that. I just want to walk my dog. So we've seen that shift a little bit. I would anticipate that will shift back, but as of right now, that's where we're at. Is kind of that owner-occupied and renter-occupied is a pretty even mix. But while the study itself is just looking at numbers from the data perspective, there's a lot of anecdotal in it too. That came out of those stakeholder groups, just that, we don't have the diversity of housing. We don't have the variety that some folks are looking for. So there's some really good suggestions in there for ways to do more mixed use, ways to redevelop areas that maybe aren't going to go back. Maybe they've been commercial and that just doesn't seem like the right fit going forward. How we can go in and do some redevelopment in those areas and such. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Lana, do you think that the millennials, you said, do you think also that we do not have the lower housing for them? Because I noticed in our rentals, most of the people are younger in it.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't have enough money to buy that big house. Do you think that?
But there's certainly some of that a lot of that generation has some pretty significant student debt, those types of things. So certainly they require a little more time to build, as you would say. So they're looking for for that rental situation until they can save enough for a down payment or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it's a mix. I would certainly agree in that.
I just noticed that in our personal rentals, that people are staying in our rentals longer
Sure.
now than they did 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and a lot of that is just there's just nowhere to go.
Yeah.
There's not other rentals to move up to. We've talked about that for a lot of years. We just flat missed a couple of generations of allowing folks to move through the housing cycle like they should have, and now we're paying the price for that. You have folks who are retired in the same house that they literally started their families in, and that's just not the traditional American city housing cycle anymore. That was really common pre-war times. That was really, really common, but really since the 50s, we've seen that the healthy housing cycle allows for the constant moving of the family from what their
Agreed.
income levels
Yeah.
will allow them to do, and then what their family sizes demand of them. So because we haven't had those opportunities for folks to move up, we have to clear the logjam in our community before we'll really see that healthy cycle pick back up again. And quite frankly, once people get comfortable, again, we've talked about that. If when you should have had the opportunity as your kids grew up, you started your family in this house. The healthy cycle, when those kids hit teenage years, you would have moved to a different house that better fit your needs. Well, since we didn't have that, they made improvements to their house to make it fit what they needed it. And then when their kids went off and they became empty nesters, and again, they should have had the opportunity to move to the next level of housing. They didn't. So they invested again in the home they were already in. So folks are comfortable in those homes now because they've continued to invest in them when there wasn't anywhere else for them to go. So it's going to be a challenge. And the unfortunate part of that is that opening up that older housing stock is really the only way that we can meet that entry level price range. And now it's going to take us a while to get back there, as we look at what costs are, take out inflation and what the pandemic has done to housing costs. But even before that, you cannot build that $180,000 house that everybody thinks they need. It's just really challenging, and right now it's impossible to build it in a way that works for families. So it'll take us a while to get healthy in the housing cycle here.
And what's the housing development called just east of the bypass off of Spruce? Where?
Wilson edition.
No, the new one, the brand new one.
Sunflower,
Sunflower? Okay, thank you.
That one's which one?
Jared Torres.
Oh, okay, in the
That's
little
where they're doing
funky
all
strip.
the new ditch work and all that stuff, okay.
Mhm.
I didn't see it in here anywhere, so I.
No, and we've only worked with him a little bit. It's in the floodplain, and so it had some challenges there, and we
Gotcha.
offered some assistance in that. But
Okay,
Shannon, as we go along and you're sitting back there thinking of numbers as you always do, kind of following up on Stuart's deal, if you counted up all of the RHIDs and developments and stuff like that that are in process, in the pipeline, how many units of that 2,000 can we kind of identify right now? So when you do your report, we have Hunter's Glen and you have Lost River, you had the Tyson deal over by, so you don't have to give it now. I want you to think, and that way you'll have exactly the number.
I'm just getting excited and getting ready.
After all of your research. Any other questions for Lana?
no, thank you.
Okay, Steve, Lana, would you like to give Steve's report?
I would love to.
By the way, how's Steve's wife?
Slow recovery.
Okay.
For those of you who don't know, she had some surgery done on her back a couple weeks ago. It's been a challenge for sure, but he's hopeful that by the end of the week, she'll be mobile enough that he can feel comfortable leaving her
Good.
again.
Good.
Yeah, she feels good, and nothing is out of the ordinary. Certainly, just she's not recovering as fast as she would have liked to. So Steve has that. There was one RFP sent out from Department of Commerce on an industrial project. It was another extraordinarily large building, and the building had to already be in existence. They weren't interested in any build to suit, so we did not respond to that one. on Western Kansas Corridor, which was formerly referred to as Red Wing. The next steps in the TIF process are the public hearings that are set for December 20th and December 21st. And then after that, that starts the clock for the 30-day window where any of the other taxing entities who are against the TIF have the opportunity to protest. So that's if they don't have to take any action. College doesn't have to take any action. School district doesn't have to take any action. If they don't take any action, we just move on to the next step. If they protest, then everything comes to a halt.
College talked about that last night. No protest.
Oh, thanks. We appreciate that. And then the rezoning application, preliminary plat and phase 1 final plat should be submitted this Friday to go before the Planning Commission at their January meeting. And then provided that it gets through Planning Commission at that meeting without any challenges, the County Commission would get the opportunity then on February 7th to complete that process. Residential, he's been working on the potential RHID mapping for the county. Also started work on some neighborhood revitalization areas for the county. Currently, we only have the neighborhood revitalization program is only available in the city of Garden City and the city of Holcomb. But the idea came up that, you know, maybe we should have that available in the unincorporated area too. So we're working on that. We've not presented that to the commissioners yet, but hopefully be able to do that shortly after the first of the year. And the Lost River infrastructure, everything is bonded and ready to go there now. So we should see dirt moving over there. I'm guessing not today. Well, there might be dirt moving, but I don't think it'll be intentional.
Not with the equipment, huh?
Yeah, not moving where we're putting it.
There
Let's
you
say
go.
that. But yeah,
May have to be moved later.
yeah, there you go. Things are going along well there. I think I told Ron this, but we did get a call from the city of Holcomb and their NRP. They missed it, but it had expired actually in 2020. And so Robin, the city administrator, did reach out and ask if we would do the magic to get it reinstated. So we're already started along that process, and we'll be taking that back to the city council in Holcomb, hopefully right away in January, and be able to get that reinstated. There's folks ready to build that. Obviously, that tool is important to them when they're building speculative houses. So hopefully we'll be able to get that reinstated rapidly and move forward. And that is Steve's report.
Any questions for Steve, Lana?
I've seen a bit of commotion going on where the new bank is supposed to go on the hill. Is that all said and done and ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, they're ready to go. All of the property along Kansas is spoken for. There's no additional commercial lots in the main piece there. There are some interior lots still available and that we've put out for a couple of prospects to look at. But
Okay.
yeah, they anticipate that they should be moving, and you know the one of the restaurants has been pretty clear that they want to be operational before the end of the year. So
Wow.
not the end of 2021, obviously 2022. So
yeah.
things have got to start moving some dirt if we're going to have folks operational in there within a year.
Speaking of TIF, what's the stance on the skate rink, the thing out by
Sports
the...
of the world?
Yeah, Sports
of the World
Yes.
complex, yeah. So that's a STAR bond,
Okay.
not a TIF. But yeah, the process is moving there to get the developer in place and move the project along.
So the
We
legal...
can't really comment anything further
gotcha.
than that.
Okay.
But yes, the process is moving along.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's all we need to know.
There you go.
Anything else?
Yeah. Obviously, we're not engaged in that. We're not a party to
Sure.
that development.
Yeah.
But certainly there's action taking place.
Good.
Okay, Scott, your report, please.
Sure. For the last few weeks, GreaterGardenCity.com had about 2,200 visits to the website. Most viewed posts had to do with the Scooters Bowl that was held there at Community College. Deke Parker, the Elkhart blacksmith, had his second appearance on Forge and Fire. Post on that was high. And just various community college posts for the last couple of weeks. On Facebook, the Greater Garden City Facebook page had about 3,800 post views, and Garden City Journal had about 48,000 post views. Top posts there were related to the Hidden Trail story and various posts related to Hidden Trail, Scooters Bowl, and high school job fair information. Twitter had about 40 tweets last couple of weeks, 6,500 tweet views, and over 600 profile visits. So, that's about all I have.
All right. Any questions for Scott? Okay,
You guys are
Shannon.
all following us on Twitter, right?
Good morning.
Good morning,
Good
Shannon.
morning. Morning, Shannon.
Just update and just to talk about how fickle Facebook is. Did a post yesterday about the hauling axes. They're putting in a permanent spot down in today's office furniture, and their grand opening is Saturday, and that by itself is at 13,000 views. So
People want to throw
just up
axes.
and
I know.
oh, so many people, and from all around the state, and from Colorado too. So anyways, so that one is out there and is up there. So the other thing, I was going to mention the RHID before even Bob brought it up. I was on the statewide housing conference about the statewide housing study that they did, and they said that the number one tool that local communities can adopt to encourage and facilitate residential growth is the RHID tool. So we already know that locally. I mean, that's how most of our housing has been built, but that is a message that they're bringing to the whole state is the usefulness of the RHID. And so the question that we had was how many, we have about 2,000 that need to be housing units that need to be built over 2,000 or over the next 10 years. And how many RHIDs do we have in the process right now? And we have about, I haven't summed it up with the most recent ones, but we have about 1,200 units in the RHID process at some stage. And that might sound really great, but if we look historically at how many units that are in the RHID that actually get built, we're usually bouncing around between a 10th, maybe a 5th on a good year. So we would expect to see, if it was typical, we'd expect to see those 1,200 units in RHID to get actually 120 of those built. So if we're talking about the usefulness of RHID and why it's a good tool, is think if our municipalities or counties was building infrastructure for 1,200 units, but only 120 of them get built. So we're building 10 times the infrastructure of what's actually getting built. We either are spending a lot of money on infrastructure, or we're trying to pick the winners and losers instead of letting the economy and the developer pick the development that actually gets built and actually is successful. So there is a lot in the hopper right now. I would expect that our follow through around what you call the actual development will be much higher. Looking at what we have here, I think we're talking probably maybe a 60 to 70% completion of those 1,200 RHIDs that are out there right now. So that's good, but again, that completion isn't in 1 year or 2 years. I mean, we're talking about developments that are multi-year. So even when we get some of these done that are 500 units or so, we're still halfway to the next 10-year study, which is going to say you're going to need another 2,000 houses. So,
Can I ask you a question on that? Does that mean that that development is just putting in so many at a time, or is he going to do the whole?
they can do it however they want.
Okay.
It's encouraged to do phasing, and I think Lana has more to say.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, the tool only works if you build the units and get them on the tax rolls quickly enough that you get the full benefit, the full 15-year recompense out of that. So it is, there are certainly would be opportunities if we had a developer who came in here tomorrow and said, hey, I'm bringing in my own crews, my own subs, I'm gonna do my own infrastructure, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I can build 200 units in 18 months. That's certainly possible. It happens all the time. It doesn't happen here. But if they did that and they said, no, we want, we're going to do this all at one time, that's certainly doable. But for what we've seen from our local developments, it is absolutely imperative that you phase it in order to give yourself time to get units on the tax rolls.
I didn't mean to break in.
No, I mean, and that brings up another point, when we don't even talk about RHIDs, that's not even my specialty, but the other thing to keep in mind is, people can have RHIDs in place, but the only way they're taking advantage of that tool and getting that money back is if they actually develop the project. So having all these sitting out there is great because it allows people to take advantage of that tool, but they're not getting any recoup of that money until they've actually developed it. They don't get to develop the infrastructure, but they're having to develop the actual lots and build those lots and turn those into units. That's where that tool kicks in, and they start to get their money back from building that infrastructure. So it's a really good tool, and I think that's why the state of Kansas is really pushing it as a way to get going, because the risk is really put on the developers, who are the ones who get to follow through on the project, and in the end get a profit on the units, not the infrastructure, but the units they build. So good system overall. I think good numbers to talk about. Okay, the thing I'm going to talk about today is not going to be surprising to probably anybody. It is a little bit of an update of some numbers, but this is looking at the state of childcare at the end of the year. The reason we had to do this is there was just a report out that maybe the childcare situation in Finney County wasn't as bad as we thought. So this is kind of just in response to two pieces that I looked at with this data. Is there's an assertion that the state of childcare is dire everywhere, and it's the same everywhere. It's the problems that we have in western Kansas is the same that we have in eastern Kansas. So we need to look at that a little bit. And then there was some ideas of there's some reports that you can generate through childcare that are very useful. But when you pull those reports, if you don't do a little bit of digging and talking to some of the local organizations, you get a kind of a wrong impression about our state of childcare in Finney County. So we have to look at that a little bit deeper, just so we get an idea here. And this report goes on longer. This is a modified version of what was presented to the county commission. I'm just going to talk about the data. I have it all. I have a couple paper copies if you want them, but I'm just going to talk about the data part. So this is just saying that some background about needing to talk about what's going on here. Okay, so if you look at the child care aware needs study from 2021, so this is their current report. One of the new things that they have is this map, which is the number of children under 3 per child care opening in communities. And one of the things, in just general, I know you don't make maps a lot, but you might be looking at stuff. See how the color in the middle is the darkest? That's not good coloring, because it's really hard to see what's going on. You can't just skim through there and see, okay, where's the most child care need? So the first step that I almost always have to do is go to recolor this. Okay, so this is the coloring that I redid it. So blue is decent. That means that blue means that there's somewhere between 0 and 10 children per child care slot that is open. And I mean, still, if we had 10 children needing trying to find one, that's not good. But compared to everybody else, that's really good. And then as we get more and more red, we have more issues with child care in this. And then the dark red is there was no slots available for any age. No matter how many kids there were, there was no slots available. So the first thing we need to talk about when looking at this map is, and we already know this as a community, but anytime something's happening and it's based on population, and Finney County is significantly different than Ford or Seward, we have to say, and this is a question we asked, when was the population data pulled from? And since they weren't able to get the 2020 census, this is based again on 2010 census. Remember, this is the severe undercount that was specific to Garden City. We have a different undercount in 2020. The nature of that is based on ethnicity and vulnerable populations, and that is spread across all of Southwest Kansas. The undercount in 2010 is specific to Finney County, Garden City. So one thing is we need to realize that our population of under 3-year-olds is about 25% higher than what's estimated here. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is when they pulled this data, the Nazarene Church was just getting open, so they had slots that were licensed, but they didn't have anybody in there yet. So this makes it look like there's a lot more slots available for the number of 3-year-olds than we have. So we talked to them, and even just addressing the time that they pulled this data now from before, we are almost in the darkest, or not the none, but the about the 40 color. and then if we do a population adjustment, we're there. The other thing we need to look at is the nature of childcare issues is the same between eastern and western Kansas. And we can definitely see from here, there are issues everywhere. I mean, having 20 or 10 kids per one slot is an issue. But when we're talking about 30 to 40 to there are no slots, this is a western Kansas thing. We definitely have a different nature of a childcare issue than eastern Kansas. And finally, the other thing that we can get from this data is, remember that we're a job hub, so people from surrounding communities are coming in for jobs here. So any of those places that have zero childcare, that's all those around, they're gonna be coming in and needing the childcare slots here because there's no child slots in the home community there. So if you go look in our commuting patterns, you've seen this before, we have a decent amount of people commuting in, and so this is also gonna increase the need for childcare in Finney County. Okay, so that was the first thing. The first thing, the nature of the childcare system between eastern and western Kansas. The second thing is just talking about this point in time childcare data. And I'm going to point out a couple things, and I'm sorry for people watching on Facebook, but I like pointing, and they put the TVs really far away from this microphone. So, the things that we're going to look at here specifically are the childcare centers and the Head Start. And you can see that there's a difference between the number of children enrolled, the desired capacity, and license capacity. And so what we need to talk about is the number of kids enrolled is actually how many kids are enrolled. Desired capacity is they're asking all of these different centers, the home centers, the Head Start centers, the preschools, that said, how many kids would you ideally like to have if you could choose how many would you like to have? And then licensed is how many can your building legally hold? And one of the things that we need to keep in mind is the amount of kids that a center or home-based provider wants to have does not have anything to do with their license. They're always going to be licensed as big as they possibly can be so that they have the options. So if we're talking about a one-person operation in a home, they might be licensed for 8 kids or however many kids that they have depending on the age breakdown, but they might only want to be doing 2 or 3 or they're just doing it so they can help out their neighbors or something like that. So the number that we're talking about when we're looking at capacity is desired capacity. That's the one that we actually care about because that's telling us how much room do we have in Finney County. So, the two big pieces where we're missing between the number of children reported and the desired capacity, the two biggest differences there is child care centers and Head Start. And the reason we're talking about this is because if you look at all this stuff, it looks like we're about short 60. So if you just take this number straight up here, we're about 60 short from the number of children enrolled and desired capacity. So you say, well, were there 60 slots available? Why is that? Well, the big reason is because when this data was pulled and this data was updated, it was not exactly up to date. So if we go look at just the child care center, so that top box there was a new poll of data. We actually went and contacted YMCA Community Daycare Turning Point to see how they're doing. And right now, they actually have 139 enrolled for a desired capacity of 159. So we picked up a couple of kids in that group. And then, when we're looking at Head Start, because it looks like we're missing about 40 kids from number of children reported, enrolled, and desired capacity. And so we talked to Janine Radke about what's going on here, and she was actually kind of confused about what that data was saying because she couldn't make it match up. So we actually said, well, just send us over what your numbers of enrolled are and your capacity. And when she did that, and we pulled it up for Finney County, we got 127 enrolled and a desired capacity of 132. So if we go and put all those numbers in, the actual updated numbers from talking to these local providers, we're actually right now at enrolled at 804 with a desired capacity of 821, which means our child care is at 97.9% capacity. And so there's some reasons why that's not 100%. Well, actually, there's even more than this because when I was talking with Janine, they had people enrolled, but it wasn't showed up in the numbers yet. But there's also issues where some of these centers can't get completely full because they keep them open, like Child Care Aware keeps slots open for foster kids, some issues with income qualifications and stuff like that. And then if we're talking about Head Start specifically, we need to keep in mind that not all of those slots are full-time care. So they're getting reported as childcare slots, but they're not over the summer, or they're not the whole hours of the workday and stuff like that. So that creates some barriers as well. If you go back just one bit, I also have on here how many people are on the wait list. For childcare centers, right now we have 78 kids on the wait list. One of those wait lists up from each of those programs, and then down here in Head Start, they're actually 115 wait lists. So even though it's not 100% capacity, our wait list is over about 180, 190. So we
And those
definitely-
wait lists are typically, sorry Shannon,
Yeah.
are typically because they just don't have that spot available. So
Right.
they've got, a 9-month-old on a wait list or an 18-month-old on a wait list. So it's just because the slots they do have open don't meet the demand
Correct.
Right.
that's currently out there.
So what are those people doing on the wait list?
Many of them are out of the workforce. That's
Because
our
they're-
real challenge. Many of them don't have the opportunity to take part in the workforce, or they're having to take part in the workforce in a different way. And so that somebody is there to care for the child. But undoubtedly, we are missing a large number of folks who would be in the workforce if we had adequate childcare.
Yeah, generally speaking, if we have somebody who would be in the workforce but having to do childcare, we usually pick up about 75% of those parents when they do go into the workforce again. So if we're talking about 200 here, we expect to see about 150 people. If we were to alleviate just the wait list, because there's a lot of people I know that have children that don't even bother trying to get on there because they know that there's. But just if we have about 200 there, we'd expect about 150 new people enter into the workforce from just alleviating what we have on the wait list right now. And so a lot of this report was addressing, they say, well, we really don't need to be investing in childcare until we get that gap closed. Until we get those 60 kids and we get them into the centers where they're just openings and they're not there. Well, so a lot of this report is just saying we don't really have much of a gap. And we have a wait list that even overcomes that gap that we have, and we just need more variety and stuff like that. So I think my next slide is so this is what that report that we were addressing this to. They're saying, well, your capacity is a little bit over 800. The number enrolled from our data pull from Child Care Aware says we're at 750. So don't even worry about addressing more childcare issues until you get that gap filled. So what we did is we actually talked to the providers, and we got the gap filled because it was just a bad pull of data. We were able to figure that out. So now we're down by a couple of people. But the point that we have always said since we started this 5 years ago is not that little piece there. Go ahead. We have this issue. We have 2,400 kids that are in potential need of care, and we're only at 26% of potential demand. So what is the gap that we actually need to look at is this next slide, and that's the red thing. The thing that we need to be worrying about isn't the difference between the dark blue and the light blue bar. That's a little problem, and we actually figured out by just getting the right data. The big thing that we need to be worrying about in childcare is the difference between the blue bar and the red bar. That's where we need to be worrying about and doing it. So that's kind of our thrust with this, is just reminding people that let's not get caught up on why we have 20 slots open in one place, or this home daycare provider has 2 kids and they want 3 kids. Let's worry about, we need to open up another 20 or so centers, or I think to make this gap up, we're talking about 100 or so home providers. So that's the gap that we need to be addressing when we're talking about addressing childcare in Finney County. And I think the last slide that I have here is just, what that breakdown would look like. So the childcare needs in Finney County, we need about 200 infant slots, all the way up to 600 slots for 4-year-olds and so forth. So it looks like right now, from what we have, we're about 1,600 childcare slots short in Finney County. And the rest of this presentation I'm not even going to go over, but there's a lot of things about childcare aware and stuff like that, and sunrise and stuff. And then the solution, and we all know what the solution is. This is a solution that we've been working on this whole time, and that's the network. That we can have a sustainable, locally driven, responsive, integrated into business, integrated into local community solution that doesn't just make centers, but also supports the home providers and the centers that are already in place. So that's my part. I don't know if Lana wants to talk about any other thing that's on these slides. I have some paper copies, and I can give you the electronic copies if you want anything from this. So.
Yeah, I think it would be really good if everybody had at least an electronic copy, because there's a lot of other good
Yep.
information about, well, what if you did, and they're responded, so.
Sure, we can get that too.
Questions for Shannon?
This is a really loaded question. So, because we have a housing shortage and because we have a childcare shortage, which, how many businesses want to locate in Garden City, but because we don't have housing available nor childcare available, which are kind of related, what would you estimate that we're losing out on? I told you it was a loaded question.
Yeah, you did. I would tell you, we have spoken openly over the last 4 years that we were rapidly approaching a place where we would have to say no to projects. To projects that we otherwise would have said yes to. We have had the luxury over the last 10 years, honestly, to be really picky about which projects we do choose to really work with to ensure their success here. And we're at a place now where we simply, it would be irresponsible to say yes, for instance, to another DFA, to another empirical. It would be irresponsible to say yes to them right now. And, you know, to your point, how many are we talking about? You know, one of those at 1,000 employees is, I would say, plenty. So I guess my answer to that would be too many. There are too many opportunities we're missing right now, simply because we don't have the infrastructure in place to manage the project. We're doing everything we can. We have been doing everything we could for the last 10 years to talk specifically about housing, for the last 6 years to talk specifically about childcare. And it is exciting that we finally have an audience who is hearing our concerns. But quite frankly, now we have to play catch up before we will be able to accommodate some of those. I would tell you, we have not, obviously, we're not stopping retail and commercial recruitment, but I would tell you that it is more and more challenging to feel comfortable saying, yeah, go ahead, open up, well, you'll find employees, because quite frankly, we have tapped out that surrounding area, that commuter map you saw. We've been really successful in pulling folks into this community to work, but they, you know, the unemployment rates across our region are insanely low. I mean, people are employed, and you guys have, you know, you've heard us report the numbers that are actually on unemployment. And most of those counties that are commuting to us, there's less than 5 people on unemployment benefits in those counties. You know, every month when I look, there's a couple of counties that they have 1, or they have 3, or they don't have any. You know, it just bounces back and forth. So to assume that we can draw any more from those communities is going to be a challenge. And then when you go and say, well, but at least we could recruit people and they could live in those communities. No, because those communities are full as well. They don't have housing available, as you saw. They don't have childcare available.
But those are people that are actively pursuing employment versus there's other people probably still on the sidelines that, you know, I don't have to have a job.
In the unemployment rate, yes.
Yeah.
That is the one thing is it's uniform. It may be uniformly bad, but at least it's uniform. But yes, you're correct. That the unemployment rate comes from actually calls that are made, random calls that get made in a community, and you're asked a series of questions. The first being, is there any adult in your home who's not working? Yes. Are they actively seeking employment? And if they don't answer yes to both of those questions, they don't count. That's correct. So there are people who are just not participating in the labor market, but they're not here. I mean, that's just that it would be a real stretch to say that we could literally even find another 200 people that are out of the labor market for any reason except housing and childcare. So.
The other day, I came back from Dodge City at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And
Don't do that.
the traffic
That's
going
nuts.
to Garden City, I mean, I was driving 70 most of the time, passing people, but the traffic coming out of Garden City at 5 o'clock, why is that? Are people getting off work, going and living there, or what?
We have a large number of folks who live in Cimarron and Dodge City.
Yep.
And work here, for sure. Lots north. You know, Scott City's done a tremendous job of building the housing that, quite frankly, we didn't build. So we've got a lot of professionals who are living in Scott County, because that's where the housing was.
So
They
we're
wanted
losing
that
out
smaller
on-
school
on
district.
houses here too.
So, yeah, you know, we would never promote the idea that we need to build all the housing for all of our workforce, because quite honestly, the best thing that can happen for us is to build housing in the outlying area. That is the best thing that can happen. You know, when we're keeping schools and hospitals thriving in communities like Sublette, Satana, Leota, Greeley County, you know, Tribune, the more we can do to support those communities, the less stress on ours, right? The less resources we're having to pull out of ours. So, and there is absolutely a sector of our workforce who far prefers that smaller community. They prefer living in the smaller community, their kids in the smaller school districts, you know, for whatever reason. So it would be foolhardy for us to say, nope, everybody who works here needs a place to live here. That's just not accurate. But we have to flip the scales, right? Right now, instead of that being a benefit, having these outlying communities that are willing to do that, that's not a benefit to us right now because we've saturated it. So we have to get ahead. And I would tell you, childcare is at least as important to our workforce as the housing side. Because as we said, there's so many of those communities that are not going to have childcare available in their communities. Or if I'm driving an hour or an hour and a half to go to work in Garden City, there are people who absolutely want their child in the same community they're in. You know, maybe they don't have anybody to respond if there's a challenge with their child back at home, but they can leave work and go take care of their child if they need to. So I would tell you that childcare is as important, if not more important, for our workforce situation than housing is.
Anything else for Shannon or for Lana on this topic? Yeah, there's some really good information in there, Shannon. Thank
Good
you
job.
once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Reports behind us. Any new business? Any old business?
What's the progress on our replacement for Nicole?
You'll get an update on that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, that would be
Comfortable?
not for public consumption just yet, but we'll certainly have an update on that in the
Okay.
executive session.
Thanks.
We will have an executive session covering client confidentiality and personnel.
Okay.
Upcoming meetings in January, we have our annual meeting, which will make our reports to all of our entities. And then also the Southwest Kansas Night Out in Topeka.
Swicknoy.
Yeah, Swicknoise. I guess that's what that means. So, and again, remind you that if you would like to attend, and I would encourage that because it's a really interesting event. And having strong support from Western Kansas when we're up there is very meaningful to them. So let Lana know so that we can acquire rooms.
And I will keep you posted as we get more information on hotel rooms and that type of stuff. I'll keep you in the loop.
Okay, anything else to come before the board? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session. So move, Sam.
A second.
Stuart, second. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
15 minutes for that one. If
15
that works for
minutes.
you guys?
All right, thank you.